Welcome to Behind the Build. I am your host, Jonathan Jacobs. And before I introduce who I have today, I want to remind you as a listener that you have found this somehow through some form of a platform. If you can give it a 5-star rating, it's going to help others find the same podcast that you're listening to called Behind the Build. Yeah. So with that said, you can also, if you want to, log into Instagram and find us there. And the reason I say that is because every individual or individuals that I have on here are going to highlight the work that they have. It's going to be visible there. Because this is not a visual medium, it's important to also understand what the visual medium does look like. Before going into the depths of today's episode, I want to bring forward Kaplan's Appliances, one of our strategic partners in sponsorship for the podcast. Kaplan's was founded in 1944. That is over 80 years of customer service for clients in and around Toronto, Canada. Think about that really for a minute. In 80 years, think about what's happened with appliances and how much they've changed. And now the importance of what customer service means to our clientele. Finding suitable products for a client, ensuring that we understand what they need for freezer space, fridge space. Where are they going to put their wine? Is it going to be panel ready? Is it not? Kaplan's has a wide array of products available for you and your clients. So if you're interested in learning more about them, I would be happy to connect you. You'll be able to gain product knowledge on Sub-Zero, Wolf, Miele, Genair, Fisher-Paykel. If you're looking for outdoor, well, it could be Lynx, it could be Kalamazoo. Feel free to email me, Jonathan, that's Jonathan, @waldenhomes.ca, and I would be happy to connect you with an in-store manager that will look to understand what your needs are to connect you with the right sales rep for your clients. And now, back to the episode. So, all that said, I'm excited because today I have two individuals with me, one of whom I had known before, one of whom I have met today. I have with me today Maggie Bennedsen and Amin Ebrahim from Cohen-Schneer, also known as KSA. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much for having us.
I'm excited about this. So Amin and I have got to know each other today. I had spoken to Maggie years ago about a project, and actually the first thing that you and I ever spoke about was the extreme biking that you have done, whom your husband has also informed me about and talked about. So when you eventually hear Rick's episode as well. Incredibly talented people that I'm excited to have here with me. I start all of these podcasts out with an explanation of kind of who you are and how you came to where you are. So you can take as long or as little as you'd like to describe that. And because it's an open forum, I'm not going to decide who speaks first. So between the two of you, you can decide. And I guess the main question is, at what stage of your life did you realize that this was a craft you wanted to pursue? Did you draw early in life? Were you more into math, drama? Like what was it? And when did you start to hone in on the idea that this was going to be a career path? And from there, school, etc. So Amin is pointing to you, Maggie.
Okay. I moved around a lot as a kid.
Okay.
I was born in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
Then we moved to Montreal. We lived in Port Colborne for a while on the Welland Canal. Lived in Sault Ste. Marie. Moved back to Saskatoon. So a lot of kind of getting shifted around from one place to another. And that may have had something to do with a notion of wanting to be a designer, particularly, residential design.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it had something to do with, the idea of home and that kind of ever changing thing. And then, in my more recent life, I've spent a lot of time traveling. And I think that has also had an impact on a kind of notion of what home means. So the decision to study architecture, it came early, throughout high school. That's what I felt I wanted to be. there was no role model or, somebody who
Head or anything. Yeah.
I mean, maybe like Elise Keaton on Family Ties. Wasn't she an architect?
No one on, what was the other show that you referenced before? No one on that show. Oh my God, there were 2 seasons of it you described.
Oh, Twin Peaks.
Yeah, no one on Twin Peaks was an architect.
No, there were no Twin Peaks. But the Brady Bunch, wasn't he an architect?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. So there you go. That's my I want to be just like Elise Keaton.
Are you checking those boxes now?
No.
Okay. So what did it look like? Like, were you trying to take courses through high school that were like kind of leading you in that direction? Or
I took drafting courses. I had an interest in art-based courses.
Yeah.
I also, the typical story. I enjoyed art. I was also reasonably adept at mathematics and, liked the idea of this profession that brought those 2 things together.
Mm-hmm.
But really, I don't know how I kind of stumbled my way into being an architect. It just seemed like a good idea, and I followed it through. That seems like the story of my life, actually. I don't know. It seemed like a good idea. But that said, it's been a fantastic career. It's been a really interesting way to spend my days. So I have no regrets about it.
Where did you go to university?
University of Waterloo.
Okay.
With all of the moving around we did, eventually my family settled for my last year of high school in Burlington.
Yeah.
And so it was Ontario universities that I was looking at primarily.
Okay.
And Waterloo had a great reputation, and
Yeah.
it had the co-op program, and all of that really appealed to me.
And so were there others that were a part of your year that are currently still practicing?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There was an event just last night, the Blackwell, I think it's a semi-annual party that they throw.
Yeah.
And it was like old home week. It was like there was so many people from my class there. And it was really lovely to see everybody. And there were people there who I see regularly anyway, but nice to get together with a group of people who are all like doing extraordinarily well. It's really, really great to see how well everyone is doing and in a lot of variety of one of the really fascinating things about architecture to me is the variety of ways that you can practice it. You can do residential where you're like getting into the details of, how people organize their socks and ties, or you can be doing, designing subway systems, which are like just a completely different world. And like, so there's so much diversity to the practice of architecture. And I think that's part of what keeps it interesting.
I spoke to someone, Shane Baptiste at the Soka, and he was saying that he was designing the 3D worlds for flight simulators.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was like, I wouldn't have even thought that was an opportunity. Like,
yeah.
So to your point, yeah. Also, Lam, right? She got her degree, and she she's working as a journalist.
That's right.
There's endless things you can do with it.
Yeah. Somebody, a friend of a friend, designed the mountain at Canada's Wonderland. It's like, yeah, it's a piece of architecture, right? It's a building.
I mean, I guess as you say that now, I'm analyzing it, and it makes complete sense. It's not a natural thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Someone had to design that.
Yeah.
So interesting.
It's such a so many different directions that you can take. So
yeah. Okay.
Nice.
And did you do postgrad?
No, Waterloo was a double bachelor.
That's right.
When I graduated,
Okay.
So I have a BES and a BArch.
Got it.
My road was like I never imagined doing architecture when I was in high school.
Okay.
Yeah. I clearly remember a moment, must have been in junior high or high school. My best friend, he said to me, I think I'm going to look into architecture. And I thought to myself, why the hell would anybody want to do that? Like it was so far from my mind. And,
where was your mind? What were you thinking?
So I really liked math and sciences, and I was doing well in that. Although at the same time, I really enjoyed English and literature and art.
Okay.
So I took art classes all the way through high school, but never really, I don't know if it was sort of a cultural thing, or I never really considered it as part of a career. And I kind of automatically assumed that I would go into engineering or some sort of science related field. So my first degree is actually in civil engineering. And So I went to school at MIT and thinking I wanted to do aeronautics. And, the first year is sort of just general kind of hardcore basic science courses, right?
Yeah.
Math and science courses. But the interesting thing was, even at an institution like that, like we had to take a quarter of our course load in the humanities, arts, and social sciences. So because of my interest in art, I started taking art history classes and architectural history classes and really started falling for it. And then in second year, you declare your major. And so I entered aeronautics. And it was really, really, I don't know how to describe it. It was kind of shocking in terms of what I saw in it, because it had such strong military implications. Like we had problem sets about trajectories for missiles and things like that. And it just scared me to death. Like I kind of questioned, do I really want to do this? Even though my intentions were, thinking about space development and things like that, or astronautics. And, but the reality of it was anything that you would do would immediately have military implications, at least in my mind. That's how I perceived it. And I also just couldn't hack the math and the science. It was really hard. So,
you didn't know Maggie at the time.
Yeah. So I decided I'd finish my engineering degree.
Yeah.
So I transferred to civil, took all my electives that I could in architectural history. And I even took some design studios as electives, and eventually graduated with sort of a kind of a more round engineering degree as far as that can be,
Right.
with the intention of studying architecture.
Interesting.
And then I worked for a year. I came back to Toronto and worked for a contractor for a year doing estimating. And
how was that? Other side of the
yeah, it was actually it was for a road and sewer and water main contractor and estimating pipe, and it was mind numbing. But it earned a bit of money.
Yeah.
And
also made you aware of what you didn't want to do.
Yeah, exactly. So in the interim, I applied to architecture schools, both here in Canada and in the States, and eventually decided to go to McGill. So I was there for 3 years.
Yeah.
That was also, it was a 5-year program, but because of my other education, I didn't have to do the first 2 years. And so it was a bachelor professional degree of architecture at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you don't, there's no requirement to get a master's degree, right?
Well, now the professional designation is a master's.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay.
But at that time, it was a bachelor's.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
So at the time, there was no requirement to have to go get a master's.
That's
It was
correct.
just an additional form of education that kind of elevated your career path potentially in some way.
That's right. They were just transitioning that into a master's program, I think maybe 2 years or a year after I graduated, at least. And they did have some options where you could kind of upgrade your bachelor to a master's at the time. But I guess I wasn't forward looking enough to do that.
Right.
Well, and I think the thinking is that it's kind of interesting if people do a first degree in something outside of architecture,
Mm-hmm.
and then come into architecture as a professional degree after. And I think it's similar in other professions as well. I think it's, you're more mature when you go into architecture school, and maybe more rounded because of whatever other things you studied.
Yeah. I can kind of see it in both ways. One is like, if you know that that's the direction you're going, you go and you jump all in.
Yeah.
Or the other alternative, is if you know you're going to end there, but you want to round out your realm of possibilities.
Yeah.
There's someone else I had spoken to. I think it was Les Klein that also went to MIT for I think the same program.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then decided like it was not for him.
Yeah.
He was accepted for that, and then switched his application just before school started to architecture.
Wow.
Yeah. It was just interesting. And the reason I say it is because there's so many people that are in the field that I've spoken to now. I guess a fraction of those that are practicing, but to hear in some ways sometimes a similar career path of heading in a certain direction and then realizing you're heading in the wrong direction, you want to deviate and go to this because this is what was really capturing like your essence of what you're looking for.
Yeah, definitely.
Fulfillment.
Yeah.
So Maggie, I'll go back to you. So you had finished school, and then what did it look like for you? Were you out traveling now because that bug was instilled in you, or did you go directly into workplace?
No, I went straight into working.
Okay.
I got a job, and I was, I was always very diligent about, not wanting to have student debt hanging over my head and that kind of thing. And so it was really important to me to have that, start a career, and started working in an office and ran into one of the partners at Cone Schneer, who had an office in the same building as the office where I was working. And they kind of approached me about the possibility of coming on. They were looking for somebody. At the time, the practice was, I think, all men. And so they were, I think, particularly looking for a woman to be as part of the team. And they were also looking for somebody with a certain set of computer skills. They wanted to get into doing 3D renderings in-house and that kind of thing. So I interviewed and was offered a position at Cone Schneer, and they were working on the Arrendale Student Centre at the time, which was a project that was won by a sort of international competition. So it was kind of a really exciting opportunity to be invited to be part of that.
Right.
So yeah, I made the switch and haven't looked back.
So we talked about this as a joke at the beginning when you're like, how do people remember the years? So do you remember what year this was?
I do remember.
It
was.
How do you remember, Maggie?
I might remember because I've got some notes in my lap here. Yeah, so it was in 98.
Okay. I mean, look, I say it because this is a non-visual medium, right? Or medium. And so what better way to describe what's going on than to see that the book is open to the page that's saved. So it's 1998 that you had joined the practice.
Yeah.
Okay. Is my math right? 26 years?
Yes and no. So I'm never comfortable giving a number of years that I've been with Cone Schneer because I have had some big gaps where I've almost escaped.
But always come back.
That's right. They pulled me back in.
You pull shoot, not knowing that when it opens up, that they also control that it goes back to the pack. You can't just like let it go.
Yeah.
It's like Hotel California.
That's a great reference.
Yesterday at the Blackwell party, I don't remember who it was, somebody I met, they told them where I was working, and they said, isn't that the place where people go and then they just stay there? So
yeah.
To which you responded, yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's what I'm hoping for the future.
That's right.
Okay. And what about yourself?
So I graduated, I think it was 95, and it was a recession. There was very little work. I couldn't find anything.
Yeah.
So I was in Montreal. I came back to Toronto and moved back in with my folks. And
we didn't establish. I apologize for interrupting you. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Toronto.
Okay.
I was actually born in Tanzania.
Okay.
But I was 5 when we immigrated to Canada. And I've lived in East York all my life, actually.
Okay.
And until I went away to school. And I graduated in 95, moved back to Toronto, and couldn't find work. So I worked. My dad was managing a car rental business. And so I worked with him for 6 months, washing cars and jockeying people around. And until I found a private tutoring job just outside of Rome.
Yep.
So I kind of jumped at that to sort of be able to see Italy. And so I left, and I was gone for about 3 or 4 months until the tutoring job finished. And then I traveled for a couple of months until I ran out of money. And then I came back and then earnestly started looking for work. And it started off with, part-time work for a few days a week for a small practitioner named Ken Coates here in Toronto, who was really great to me. And then eventually I landed a part-time job at Montgomery Sysom, and that became full-time. And I was there for about 8 or 9 years, and then moved to Shore Tilby Irwin, which was sort of an established Toronto larger firm. And then that became Perkins and Will.
Wow.
And it kind of grew exponentially. And I was there also for about 9 or 10 years until this opportunity at Cone Schneer came up. And I just jumped at it because I always admired the work.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been there since.
And what year do you remember?
It's about 10 or 11 years ago that I started at Cone Schneer.
2013, because you
That's
came
right.
on because I was going on mat leave.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was the new Maggie for a little while. Yeah.
See, what I like about this right now is that this was not rehearsed. This was just a nice little and fresh dialogue. That's great. Nice to be a witness to that.
Yeah.
And
yeah, we actually rehearsed this yesterday.
Yeah. We sat down in chairs.
Yeah.
We were like, okay, we'll make eye contact here. Okay, so this is 2013. So mat leave. So you went on mat leave.
Mm-hmm.
You filled in.
Yeah.
The new Maggie. And what were some of the? I know your major project at this time was now raising a child.
Yeah.
But prior to that, like, what were some of the projects that you came in? You know, you talk about the excitement of working on. You said it was the
Arrendale Student Centre. Yeah, which is the U of T Mississauga campus.
Right.
Used to be known as Arrendale Student Centre.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a real draw to bring me into Conchneer.
Yeah.
So Fraser Mustard is one of the projects that really stands out as an important, project that means a lot to me. But there were a number of smaller projects as well. There was a mixed-use building on Dundas with a apartment above a retail store. There was a private residence on Scarborough Road in East Beaches area.
Yeah.
Other residential projects that I worked on. So yeah, there was a really nice diversity of work.
Yeah, it sounds like an eclectic, like completely different.
Yeah, and it's always been nice to kind of jump between those scales. To be working on, one year working on a residential project, and really the kind of intimate relationship that you develop with a residential client, and the way that you you're really you're intertwined in their lives for a while. And
for us, it never ends. You build it, and then you're there servicing them for life.
Yeah.
Because if the relationship works, that's how it works.
Yeah. No. And we've had that experience, like actually passed on to other owners of the house that we designed. That like the old owners sold, new people moved in. They had some questions or issues and contacted us, and the cycle kind of started anew with another set of people. So and I mean that is one of the wonderful things about architecture, about creating buildings, is they're a part of you. They're really meaningful to you, and creating buildings that are meaningful to the people who inhabit them is really important. But as is making something that you're proud of and that you are pleased that you've made this thing exist in the world. So
and the relationships, right, that you build with whether it's private residential clients or people at the school board, or people you don't see, also like the kids who occupy the school. Like these are all kind of different types of relationships that you kind of invest yourself into, right, and become attached to in an odd way.
And that element to me is what is so interesting about when you work on something like a school. Like, if 20 years ago or 25 years ago you were working on a university building, who knows? Like, if you're listening to this and you walked through the Arrendale building, can you email us? It's jonathan@waldenhomes.ca. Because wouldn't it just be cool to be able to say, hey, yeah, Maggie, I really appreciate what you did there, right? Or as you start to talk about some of the projects you're on, to get the feedback from that. Because I remember when I was in university, I went to Guelph Humber, and it was Humber's North Campus. And I'm going to blank on the architecture practice that designed it. I can't remember. But I do remember in my first year working at Walden, I called the lead architect from the project and told her how important her work was for my experience in university. We had a 4-story plant wall, and it was like the first of its kind in North America. Yeah,
we did a project for the Pratt Library at U of T, and we got an email there's a project we did 20 years ago. We got an email very recently because they'd done a little bit of work in their entry lobby, and certain aspects of it had not gone very smoothly. They'd just gotten somebody to come in and install something, and they were left with kind of electrical trailing all over the floor. And they kind of wanted to know if we'd be interested in helping them find a design solution to fix this issue. And so John Schneer and I went, and we got a tour of the building with them, and they were so complimentary about like how much they love the spaces, and oh, this is where, you know, kids take Instagram photos of themselves all the time, and this is 20 years on, they're still like so
Vibrancy to it.
yeah. They're still kind of gushing about how much they love the project. So that's really so incredibly gratifying, and yeah, knowing that like so many students have passed through those doors and sat at, you know, the desks that we designed, and
The time will come, I feel like, where you're going to interview someone to come work at the practice, and they'll say, I've been looking forward to the potential of working here for years because I've walked through the buildings. Like, that day will come.
I think it kind of already has.
Has
Like,
it?
I think, I mean, for me, I remember when I was one of my earlier jobs, and Pratt Library, I think, had just opened, and I went to visit it, and I was just mesmerized. And I thought, this is kind of next level, right? And wouldn't it be great to work there at some point? And 20 years later, it happened, right? But I think the challenge with buildings, libraries in particular, because they're changing so much.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, some of the questions we ask ourselves are like, how do you make a project that will stand through time, right? And not only longevity in terms of, you know, materials or detailing or envelope or systems, but longevity in terms of planning and flexibility. And, you know, it's not going to look old because trends have changed, right? Like, how do you make something that feels timeless, right? And modern at the same time. I think these are fundamental questions for us in all of our projects, regardless of scale, right?
Is there an easy answer to that question?
No, not at all. Not at all. And I think that's part of the fun in it, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's the rigor and the process and the thinking and the challenging and the questioning that is really the best part about it.
And I think that may be part of why there's no Cone Schneer project. There's no Cone Schneer style. You don't look at a building and go like, oh yeah, that's a Cone Schneer. I think that every project we do is very very kind of customized to the people we're working with, to the you know, the light, the wind, the kind of physical constraints of the site, but also what the needs of the clients are. And yeah, I think that's a kind of very fundamental aspect of how we work with people, and whether it's individuals or whether it's a kind of a body that are representing a larger institution. There's a real desire to kind of get at the bones of what it is that they need, and find kind of creative solutions that solve those problems. And I think that's a big aspect of why there's a kind of timelessness to the work that we do.
I can appreciate what you're saying, and I was actually just describing this to prospective clients a couple of days ago when we were talking about design, and it was one of the first people I've spoken to who said this kind of looks like they can kind of do whatever the client requests, this specific portfolio. And I was like, yeah, but really, like, a lot of people can. There are some that are out there that are trying to focus on, you know, let's call it either contemporary or modern architecture, and that's what their focus is. And then there are others that want to do something else, and then there are some that are just really open to the idea of being creative. And so just understanding who you're going to meet with that can fulfill what your requirements are going to be. And ultimately, it's going to be a lot of like, who do you connect and resonate with on a personality basis? Because that's really how everything should be judged.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think it also has a lot to do with, like, I think a big part of our job is really trying our best to listen, right? Like, because through that process, you begin to understand what a person's or a user group's needs are, right? And can we get to know them better than they know themselves, right? Because I think that's the thing that architects can offer. We can offer a bigger picture, right? And so that, you know, like the whole is greater than the sum of each part, right? And so do we have the ability to step back and really think it through so that for the end product, the client, whether it's a family or their kids or students or some sort of institution, where they say, oh, I kind of get it now, right? And this is exactly what I was looking for, but couldn't really voice it, right? And for us, I think that's important, as well as kind of an element of surprise, right? This kind of playfulness in some of the work that we do that is deliberate, right? But it's meant to surprise, but it's also drawn from, I think, what we learned from our particular client on that particular project.
We did a lot of public consultation on a project not far from here, the Thorncliffe Fraser Mustard
Early Learning
Academy, which when the project started was called Thorncliffe Park Elementary School Addition, because the new school didn't have a name just yet. And so there was a lot of engagement with the community that was going to be using this school. And I remember one of the comments at one of these meetings was, we were asking people for their ideas about the design. And somebody said something about, a building where like the doors feel like arms that are opening up to, engage you. And it was like, that's an amazing concept. And how do we put that into architecture? How do we make architecture that is just absolutely inviting and welcoming? And so I think that's a big part of what we do, is trying to listen to what people are saying and kind of get to the core of it. What's the intent here? Because obviously we did not design a building that had great big arms that opened up to let you in and out. But I think we did do a good job of creating a building that just really felt like it was meant for that community, and made them feel like they had a place there, like they were really welcome there.
I'm a movie guy, and I'm just thinking as you describe that, the what's it called, the doors opening and welcoming you. This is not really in line with like the discussion, but the visual is. Have you seen Deadpool and Wolverine?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
Not yet. I'm sure it's coming. I've got an 11-year-old. I'm
Yeah.
sure it's coming.
So there's this kind of it's a building, and at one point where you can see a portion of the kind of like the upper body, but it's huge, and there are arms that are acting as like the walls surrounding the courtyard in the center. And when the door opens to the front, it's the hands that opening up.
Right.
That's visual
great.
that I got in my head as you were describing this.
And that's exactly, and that is the literal interpretation of this idea.
I did not think today that I would be referencing Deadpool and Wolverine while we talked about your practice and your careers. So I apologize.
I love it. I love it.
No, I think that's great.
Ryan and Hugh, if you're listening to this, be happy to talk about architecture. We've got some people here that know how to design.
Next time we can offer you a little more salty.
Okay, so Amin, so when you joined, obviously there was a number of projects that were either on the go or that were probably being awarded as a part of an RFP. What did it look like early on for you at the practice?
Well, I was hired really initially to cover for Maggie, and it was this particular all kindergarten school, Fraser Mustard Early Learning Academy, that was in construction. So I took on the contract administration of that, and that was kind of my introduction to the work of Konchnier, like close up, and which was really fantastic because it's an exceptional building, I think. And I had no hand in the design, so I can take no credit for it, right? But to be sort of thrown into that and to try to understand the design intent and to maintain that through construction and to work with this client, that's what I was initially thrown into. And then that led to other projects that were on the go in the office. One was the Rosemary House, which was also partly under construction. And so it was really sort of a mixed, quite a mixed project base. There were some renovations to some rental apartment building public spaces up in the Young Davisville area. Okay. And, sort of 1950s kind of mid-century modern buildings. Our propositions for lobby spaces, laundry rooms, corridors, renovations and upgrades were all kind of in the spirit of that.
And this is on Davisville?
Yeah, Davisville and Beloil.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a bunch of buildings, and so we did.
Just trying to visualize which ones you're talking about. Okay, I know.
Yeah. So we did some work for that client, and then over the past 10 years, there've been other house projects like the Wrap House, which I worked closely with John Schneer on from concept through to completion of construction.
Yeah.
And more recently, some schoolwork for the Catholic District School Board, some elementary schools that are now being built, almost done, one of them, and a high school that's on the boards.
And what does that look like from a timeline? Just for, because if you're listening to this and you study residential architecture, you might not understand the timeframes associated with this. But also, if you are in school and listening to this, you also might not understand timelines. And if you are currently working in any practice that does any form of institutional, civil, or commercial work, you probably do very well understand timelines.
I think, timelines for residential are kind of more predictable, right?
Yeah.
It can be on the boards in the office for anywhere from 6 months to a year, right? And
from when you're awarded the project, through till the start of construction,
depending on municipal approvals and all of those complexities. It can be very simple and streamlined, or it can
over the counter,
take a while.
Over the counter permit, right, or
not,
or neighborhood fight.
And there's also like differences with different clients. Some clients are just like, you do your thing and we like your work and we trust you, and others are like very much engaged so there's a lot of variation there in how long it can take.
Well, and also which entity, or I should say which municipal governing authority you're applying to.
Definitely.
That can vary substantially, even in like townships to cities, and North York can be different than City Toronto.
And then the construction is, you probably know better than us, anywhere from a year to 2 years typically, right, for a new build or even an intensive renovation.
And if you're a client, you know that that's generally pretty accurate, even though we would all like to have it done quicker. It's not the case.
Yeah. But for the more public buildings, the institutional projects of schools, I've got to say, we don't even know what the timelines for those are. The client initially sets a timeline, but the city approvals process, particularly the site plan application process, is very unpredictable and incredibly time consuming. So for some of these schools, like one of them was awarded to us in 2018, and it's just being completed now in construction. So that's 6 years from start to finish.
Which is actually, I feel, relatively quick from the standpoint of winning the project to completion, because I also understand like sometimes it can take, you could be in talks with the city and applications and reviews and back and forth, and it can take up to 10 years sometimes on a project.
Yeah, fortunately, we haven't had to do with that, but they are still they're still long processes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And what is it that you, or how do you see the practice evolving on a go-forward basis?
So, Amin and I have been working alongside John Schneer and Marty Cohn for decades now, and we've started talking with them about the future of the practice, and we're at a point now where the two of us are being brought into the role of principals and getting ready to transition into partnership at the firm. So John and Marty are still very actively engaged in design at the office, but we're taking on more of the management of the practice.
So it's essentially, sounds to me like they strongly contemplated and are looking to execute in some level of a succession plan that some people really struggle with doing and don't have the forward vision to be able to try to plan what that's going to look like. So first off, I would say congratulations to that, because
Thank you.
Also very validating of a successful career to date.
Yeah, we're certainly extremely excited, and we've got really great support from John and Marty, really amazing shoulders to kind of to pull us up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I never met John, but I met Marty.
Mm-hmm.
And he always had seemed like a very direct, transparent type of person who speaks what he feels, which is a really important quality to be able to have when you're running a practice.
Yeah.
but also can appreciate what's in front of him when it's there. So,
I mean, sort of mentioned at the beginning of this, the fact that Conchneer is this office where people go and they don't leave. And I think, that's very much the case for the two of us, but it's also like, I think that's a real testament to the environment that John and Marty have created there. The people that we work with, I think we have all always felt very much appreciated. We've always felt very much like it's been recognized that the work that's being produced, like we certainly couldn't produce any of the projects that we work on without the amazing staff that is at Conchneer.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I hope that we are able to carry that aspect of the project forward just as much as every other aspect, that we create an environment that people feel appreciated, and that the work is rewarding for them.
And also, I think they've kind of set a really kind of exemplary tone in terms of, for lack of a better term, sort of a work-life balance in terms of trying to establish that in our practice, where design and quality is extremely important, in hand with everyone's well-being, right? So, there's never kind of any aversion to, adventurous vacations or anything like that, right? Like there's always kind of a keen interest and support, and sort of, a control on the amount of hours that people work, so people are not exhausted and kind of come eager and invested to work, right? Yeah. So I think it's a good model for kind of a good working environment.
And what does it look like in terms of staffing now? How many people are at the practice?
We are 8.
Yeah, 8 or 9. It's always kind of been at that level, fluctuating between 7 and 10, kind of as long as we remember. Yeah.
In terms of like the number of projects that you generally take on, whether it's early stage of like design development or into construction, is there would you say that there's somewhat of an active standard range of projects, and I say range, number of projects?
I think it varies greatly, because some projects are, there was a project that we did, we've done a lot of work for Dufflet Pastries. There was a project that we did that was called Dufflet's Shelf. Like, so some projects are these tiny little things, and other projects are these 6-year long, new school.
Right.
So I don't think that you could pinpoint a number of projects that we typically have on the boards.
Yeah. And I think, the range and scale definitely varies, but we're particular about the work that we pursue and that we take on, right? I mean, all of the public work is through public RFP processes, so it's extremely competitive.
Yeah.
But we target the ones that we're interested in, and we think we frankly have a shot at, right? There's always those kinds of decisions, and there's always the horizon, the 6-month horizon that we think forward to, whether should we start looking more aggressively or not?
Yeah, or do we take on a smaller project potentially that's going to eat up some of our resources if there's an opportunity that we think might come up in the next couple of months that we won't be able to go ahead and submit a proposal on, answer the RFP. That's I feel like that actually is probably one of the hardest things to do when managing a business in some way.
As we are finding out.
Like, I am constantly, in my role at Walden, like I'm constantly evaluating what's in front of us and how does it fit in line with, from a scheduling standpoint, but then from an internal resources standpoint.
Yeah.
And what can you take on, and what's it going to do? And is it going to help us, or is it going to hinder us? The H's, help or hinder.
Yeah. There's always that, and there's the inherent unpredictability in that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you get a project and then it doesn't start, or it gets pushed off by a year, or it gets accelerated. So there's only there's just a certain level you can predict things, and then you just kind of hope for the best. Well,
on the prediction side of things, you say that, and we talk about all of this, there's also the side of like the staffing. And, so you go and you apply and you win this large scale project, and you realize like you need your core staff. And then someone says to you, oh, by the way, I think I'm going to go try something new. And you're looking at what's in front of you, and you're like, oh, I wish you all the best, but you're really leaving us high and dry right now. So, can you stick around another 6 months? That's something.
Yeah, no, and I would say that the office has not been. We have had those moments, absolutely, where people have said they were going to leave, and we've managed to coerce them not to, or at least done our best to try.
Yeah.
But for the most part, people want to be there, and so I think we're very fortunate in that way.
Well, I mean, look,
people have been very responsible, right? Like people attach themselves to projects that they work on, so they plan their moves at appropriate times, right? And I think that's been consistent because people like to do the work.
Yeah, it is very personal, and you do feel very much invested in every project.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and look, it makes sense that you can retain people and people are interested in the work if the work you're winning is interesting work that can keep people motivated and trying to find solutions for new problems. If you're doing a lot of the same thing, and it's just an output of like basic plans, you can understand the turnover ratio.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So outside of the practice, what does your life look like, and how do you get to enjoy your life? And I leave it as an open-ended question because what better way to ask that question than leave it open-ended?
Well, I have a 7-year-old boy.
Yeah.
So he takes up pretty much all the rest of my time, and it's fantastic. He's incredibly, I guess, as most kids are, but he's incredibly energetic and heavily invested in soccer right now.
Fantastic.
And so that's keeping me really like active and happy, right? And I take him to his soccer practices twice a week, and it's in a bubble right in East York, and there's a track around it. So I even though I hate running, I've started running just to be able to keep up with him because I think we're at that point where
if you don't make a change.
Because right now I'm still faster than him. I'm better at most things than him. But this year I've noticed a change. Like either I'm slowing down or he's speeding up.
I have to I really hope that your son comes back to this podcast in like 7 years and says, "Oh, by the way, Dad, how you feeling now?"
So I gotta. That's why I'm running now. And but that's so outside of work, that's a big thing, right? And we try to we love the outdoors, so we're trying to get him to love that as well. So we go for family hikes or small trips and excursions and visits to family and things like that. So
and travel.
A little bit. I think my wife's family is from Iran.
Yep.
So a couple of years ago, we went as a family to Iran so he could meet his grandparents and his extended family and all of that.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's always an adventure. I mean, it's such an incredible country.
Yeah.
And so there's that. And a couple of summers ago, I think we went out west and we kind of drove through the Rockies from Vancouver to Calgary. And that was kind of an epic trip, right?
How old was your son when you did that trip?
He was 5 or 6.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
so he did some hiking with us and some canoeing, and that was really kind of a phenomenal landscape, right?
I was going to say eye-opening, right?
Yeah.
5, 6-year-old, you realize how small you are compared to those mountains.
Yeah. So that's kind of outside of work. That's kind of what's happening.
And yourself, Maggie?
I have the good fortune to be married to somebody who is a kind of a glutton for adventure. So he is always pushing for the next big adventure. So it started, when we started dating, he was talking about, he had this dream of riding his bike from sort of Alaska down to Ushuaia in Argentina.
Yeah.
But he knew that he couldn't, put that on the table right away. So, we started doing some smaller bicycle trips together.
Smaller. For that, just anyone, so you can know this, that there is an interview that I've done with Rick where I would say about 3/4 of our discussion was about adventure expeditions. So he'll take what you're saying now and he'll just completely expand upon it.
So we started with smaller bike trips, and eventually I agreed that yes, let's do this like pole to pole trip. I'm gonna come along and I'll see how far I make it. And in the end, I made it. And we did the whole trip together, and it was absolutely an adventure of a lifetime.
For sure.
You know, we've gotten a little bit, I don't want to say softer. That's not quite it, but we enjoy. Oh, maybe.
I mean, it's older.
Yeah, but I think we you know, when you're traveling on your bicycle for 2 years, you you get used to being just dirty, and your gear gets all worn out, and you know, your clothing is sort of shredded because you've used it so thoroughly. But so while we were doing that trip, you know, the thing that I was like dreaming of was like being back in an office, going into work like in a clean white t-shirt with a like coffee.
Some level of sophistication brought back into life.
That's right. But at the same time, you know, that pull is still there.
Right.
But we have sort of modified the kinds of trips that we do. We've at a certain point we got a dog, and dogs and bike trips don't go quite as well together as dogs and canoe trips do. So we started doing a lot of canoeing, which we had both done a bit of when we were in high school.
Yeah.
But yeah, so most of our adventures these days are with our young son, just going on paddling trips. And yeah, it's a whole it is amazing how much there is to see in the world, but also just in Ontario. It's just so much to offer.
One of the things that my dad had bestowed upon me before he left this world, he was like a big fan of Canadiana, also building, but so I get to fulfill that. But to see Canada before you go see the world.
Mm-hmm.
Because this country has to offer so much diversity in the landscape, the people, the cultures. It's like go see the country.
Yeah.
And so
and I would say just go see Ontario. Like, it's amazing. We went on a canoe trip this summer that absolutely blew my mind. We finished the trip by paddling down the Kopka River, and it is one of the most spectacular spaces I've ever been in. It was architectural. Like we were paddling around on this. It's a series of waterfalls and kind of pools that along this river, and paddling around in one of these pools where these giant granite walls, and you just like, you can't even fathom what created these spaces and how long they've been in existence.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was mind blowing. It was so beautiful.
I was just looking this morning to piggyback on, like, because you realize like how small you are when you're in these grand spaces, right? And I was looking at an account, it's called Galaxies on Instagram, and I'm infatuated with the concept of like, we are just literally dust comparatively to what's out there. And you look, and it's from one of the Voyager ships, and there's like a sunbeam kind of cascading through the galaxy, and there's a tiny speck in the beam of sunlight, and it's Earth.
Incredible.
And you can see all these other galaxies around, and it's, the comment is something along the lines of, all of your problems, all of your issues, everything that you like you're concerned about is on that speck.
Yeah.
So go and see it. I want to say thank you. For joining me. I always get a little bit like kerfuffled with my exit on these interviews because I don't like for them to end. I'd really like to continue to chat and talk about it all. But I appreciate you taking time out of your day to do this. I know that you've been really busy with some deliverables you have right now. I am very appreciative of the candor, learning more about you both as people. I am so excited for you. When I found out this news, I was just so excited. So I'm thrilled to be able to be a part of the sharing of this information, and also the stage of life that you're at right now. And I don't say this with many people, but I just was talking about someone else. You get to a certain point of your career and what you do, and you start to hit like the glory of your career. And I say that from like your understanding of all the things that you've done and now being able to apply it all. And so I apologize, I'm ranting, but you're about to enter into a new phase of your career. And I think that you're probably entering that phase of your career at like the most opportune time of your career, without really knowing you, Amin or Maggie. But the possibility for what you will now bring to what you're going to do and how you can help change the landscape of what the business has been and what it will be is a really exciting thing that I'm looking forward to being able to watch from afar.
You make me more excited for it.
It's a daunting task, but also like pretty inspiring. So
yeah.
So thank you both very much. I appreciate it.
It's been a real pleasure.
Very much. Yeah.
Thank you.